So this webinar is going to be recorded. The recording is actually already started, so you're not going to hear a little message. I'm just going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome once again to the Crafting Powerful Writing, Precision, and Clarity webinar. This is a presentation of the New York State and CSEA Partnership for Education and Training. My name is Jess Rossman, and I'll be your host for the webinar, and our facilitator today is Regina Robinson. At this point, I'm just going to check to make sure that everyone's microphones or phones are muted. This helps us keep background noise to a minimum and avoids disruptions. Looks good. Now, if you have any questions or comments as we go through the webinar today, there's two ways that you can share your thoughts. The first is to use the raise hand button. So now that's located at the bottom of your screen, and it should be next to a smiley face button. That's actually the reaction button. So to make sure that everybody can find this, can you all click on the raise hand button for me? Once you do that, you should see a hand go up next to your name in the participants panel. And that means I can see it too. I see a good number of folks raising their hands. See if we can keep that going. Click on that raise hand button. And that lets me know I can do the same, so you can see what that looks like. And then you're actually just going to click on that same button to lower it again. And you'll know it's no longer selected because it won't be yellow anymore. When you click on it, it turns yellow. Okay. So now with that function, what that means is that you either are participating in one of our activities or you have a question. So if you have your hand raised, I might reach out to you and say, do you have a question? And then we'll unmute you and you can speak using your phone or a microphone attached to your computer, however you called in today. And let's see. Okay, so you can also type in any questions or comments into the chat box as we go along. If you don't have that open yet, please click on the chat bubble at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. That will open the chat box right above it. And then you're just going to want to make sure that everyone is selected in that to area, type your message, and then press enter on your keyboard to send. Okay, so as I mentioned previously, today's webinar is sponsored by the New York State and CSEA Partnership for Education and Training, or as many people refer to as just the partnership. Some of you may be wondering, though, what exactly is the partnership? And for those of you who aren't as familiar with us, the partnership is a joint organization that administers education and training programs for CSEA represented employees through labor management cooperation. It's funded through negotiated agreements between New York State and CSEA. So the partnership whose mission is to promote career mobility, improve job skills, support workplace safety and health, and promote effective labor management relations. You can learn more about us on our website or by calling us directly, and I will be providing this contact information again at the end of today's webinar. All right, now that we all know a little bit more about the partnership, let's get started with the Crafting Powerful Writing, Precision, and Clarity webinar. I'm going to turn the presentation over to your instructor, Regina.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Crafting Powerful Writing, Precision and Clarity webinar. Again, my name is Regina Robinson, and I'll be the facilitator for today's webinar. And I see a lot of familiar names, so some of you already know that I've been teaching for the partnership for about 15 years, and most of my classes are in the areas of writing, reading, and pronunciation, so the communication skills. So again, welcome back. And I think that a lot of you will hear some repetition from our last webinar, which is very, very good because the more we hear things, the more we absorb. So before we talk about making your writing more powerful and precise, let's discuss the opposite for a moment. Now, I think we've all read emails or other documents that were written badly. Now, when you think of bad writing, what comes to mind for you?
Okay, so to answer Regina's first question, I'm going to have you type in the chat box. So tell us in the chat box what do you think makes a written document or passage bad? And again, if you haven't opened the chat box yet, just do so by clicking on the chat bubble at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. That'll open it just above, and then type your thoughts in the box and press enter on your keyboard when you're done. Okay.
We're getting some very good answers. Unclear or confusing. Incorrect grammar. It's not clear. Yes. Wow, you guys. Jessica, I think they're covering all the topics of this webinar. Good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing those ideas. Now, when you come down to it, I think that any writing that's confusing, yes, or overly complicated qualifies as bad writing because we just don't want to read it. And none of us wants to spend time writing something that people don't want to or won't read. So, I think the need for clear writing has become more important in recent years. Most of us are busier in our jobs than we've ever been before, so we just don't have time to spend reading confusing documents. In fact, I think most people make a decision when they open an email, memo, or report. They ask themselves, is this something I can scan through or read quickly? Or do I need to put it away and read later? And you and I both know that later may turn into never. But by keeping our written documents simple and to the point, it's more likely they will be read and understood. And because of that, clear writing makes your words more effective. Now, all the writing we do, from emails to formal reports, even academic writing and personal writing, will benefit from clear and concise writing. And today we'll be exploring ways to help make your writing easier to read and understand. And these are things that you can start using right away. First, we'll start by talking about good organization. Next, we'll discuss the don't ramble. We'll also talk about how the words you choose can either make your writing more effective or harder to understand. Finally, we'll take a look at some of the tools and methods that are available to you to help you edit and proofread your writing. Now, as we go along, feel free to ask questions by clicking the raise hand button or typing them in the chat anytime you'd like. And there'll also be time at the end of the webinar to ask any questions you may have as well. Okay, as I mentioned a few moments ago, we'll be covering 4 main topics today: planning and organization, using plain language techniques to keep your sentences simple and direct, choosing the right words for clarity and precision, and tools and methods to edit and proofread your writing. So let's begin by talking about the best way to get started when you write. Now, some of you already know from our previous webinar, before you even put pen to paper, you should start by thinking about your goal and how you want to plan and organize your ideas. We've only set a short time aside for this topic because we have covered in another webinar, the foundations of good writing. But because it's such an important area, we'll cover it briefly here as well. Now, before you write, if you want your writing to be powerful and impactful, you should make a plan first. You know that saying, fail to plan, plan to fail. To do that, it's helpful to ask 3 questions. Why are you writing this document? Is it to inform people? To summarize the decisions you made in the meeting? And why is this information going to be important to the reader? This will be your purpose. That's the purple section of our pie. Who is going to be reading this document? Is it a busy manager, co-workers, all New York State citizens? This is going to be your audience, represented by the green section of the pie. And what are you writing about? Are you reporting on an incident? Explaining a new policy? This will be your content, the blue section. So, just to review, planning before you write anything is key and always involves identifying your purpose, your audience, and your intended content. Now, it's easy in a busy world to just start writing before you've thought about the best way to organize your main ideas. And a lot of us do that. But if you don't take the time to do that, your writing may ramble and your goal for the writing the document may get buried in the details. The clearer your thinking is about your topic, the more effective your writing will be. Now, it doesn't matter whether you write your ideas on the back of a sales receipt, use mind maps with circles and lines, or do a full outline, the topical outline with letters and numbers. The important thing is to organize your thoughts before you type that first paragraph. Okay, I'm curious. Can anyone here tell us something you've done in the past to organize your thoughts before writing?
Okay, let's use the chat box again. So share any techniques you've used in the past to organize your thoughts before you get started writing.
Mind maps, outlines, mind research, color coordinated sticky notes. Yes, outlines. Yeah, great. You write it down. Absolutely. Lists. Yep. Okay. Post-it notes, I love that idea, that you can rearrange. And you can also use some digital organizational tools, and you can create a digital outline in Microsoft Word. The important thing to remember, and I think you guys have this, is that the outline is for you. So use whatever method works best. Now, as I mentioned a bit earlier, if you'd like to learn more about planning and organizing your thoughts, you may want to take the Partnerships, the Foundations of Good Writing webinar when it comes up again. Okay, now, before we move on to the next topic, which is plain language, does anyone have any questions about planning and organization?
If you do have a question, remember that you can click on that raise hand button at any time, or you can type your question in the chat. I'm just going to do a quick scan to make sure I didn't miss anything, Regina.
Okay.
Okay, really active group in the chat, which we love to see, but I'm not seeing any questions. So if I miss something, just feel free to drop it in anytime. But I think we're okay.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to our next topic, which is how plain language techniques can make your writing clearer. Now, have you ever read an important form that was so confusing that you weren't sure how to fill it out? It's frustrating, isn't it? That's one of the reasons that the federal government came up with their plain language guidelines. Have any of you heard of plain language? Raise your hand if you have. And I think we're going to get a lot of raised hands.
Oh, wow, look at that. Yeah, go ahead and click on that raise hand button for us if you've heard of plain language. And let's see.
Oh, I got to get my participants. Okay.
Oh my gosh. There's more than I can actually count easily. So at least half of the class, yeah.
Good, excellent. I have a feeling that those were people in our foundations workshop. Okay, now the website plainlanguage.gov describes plain language as a style of writing that allows readers to find out what they need in a document and understand it the first time they read it. That sounds like what we're trying to do here today, doesn't it? Interestingly, they found that when they used plain language, their employees spent less time answering questions and they needed less staff to enforce regulations. It helped their customers and their bottom line too. And now, luckily, many New York State agencies have embraced the plain language movement too. Now, these guidelines suggest that writers use short paragraphs and sentences, use the active voice, and use common everyday words. Now, you may not be able to follow all these guidelines every time you write, but each of these tactics you use will make your writing easier to understand. So let's tackle these ideas one at a time. Yikes. Take a look at the paragraph on the screen. Ugh. Would you enjoy reading it? Probably not. It's discouraging to see a wall of text. It can feel intimidating to readers, and they may not even try to read that. I'm guilty of that. Therefore, one of the first plain writing guidelines is to keep your paragraphs short. Each paragraph should cover one subject or topic and have around 3 to 5 sentences. Using short paragraphs can make your writing more inviting to your reader. One of the simplest things you can do to fix this problem is to divide one long paragraph into 2 shorter topics. Now, you should also work to keep most of the sentences in your paragraphs short too. Long sentences can be boring and difficult to read. I think we all know about that. In fact, the length of sentences is one of the main things that determines the reading grade level of a document. The longer the sentence, the higher the reading level. And the higher the reading level, the harder it is to read. Ideally, your sentence will have less than 20 words. If you got more words than that, think about splitting the sentence into 2 parts. And a good sentence should contain only one idea. So if a sentence contains more than one thought, break it up and change each idea into its own sentence. So let's see how this works. And it's very easy to do. As I said, it's good to break long sentences into 2. However, when you do that, you still need to have a subject, which is who or what did the action, and a verb, what they did, in each new sentence. So I guess you remember from 8th grade English, a complete sentence must have a verb and a subject. Now on the screen, I'm showing a long sentence that could be divided into 2 parts to make it easier to understand. Right now, the sentence reads, a revision of the website will result in increases in our efficiency in the servicing of our New York State citizens. First, it helps to figure out what's going on in the sentence. Let's look at the first section of the sentence. Thanks, Jessica, for highlighting that. A revision of the website. I would say that the first idea is that the website's is being revised, okay? That could actually be a sentence on its own. If we want to clearly state who revised it, we could say, we are revising the website. Now, I'd like you to try it. I'd like you to make the section in yellow will result in increases in our efficiency in the servicing of our New York State citizens, and I have to take a breath after that, into a full sentence of its own.
Okay, so in the chat box, go ahead and try rephrasing that sentence so it's a little easier to read. Make it simpler if you can.
Yeah, because it's not organic.
Definitely not organic.
It's not organic.
Definitely not plain language.
No, let's see, we're getting some. Okay. Let's see. Get down.
There's a couple good answers in there. I think this is taking folks just an extra minute.
Yes, we will better serve our New York State. It will increase efficiency overall. Okay, good. Okay. Yeah, great. We will service our New York State citizens more efficiently. Good. All of these are good. Okay. Good. Yeah, you guys are getting this. Absolutely. Will result in an increase. Right. So when I read this part of the sentence, I get the idea that the web page revision will make service to New York State citizens. Yep, all of these are good. More efficient or better, if we want to use an even simpler word. But it's not a whole sentence yet. what will make service better? The revision will make it better. So we could add the words, this revision will, or this will, to the beginning of the new sentence. And if we cut out some of that flowery language that was there, like results in increases in our efficiency, we might end up with something like, this will help us to serve New York State citizens better. Yes, good. So our improved sentences might look like this. We are revising our website. This will help us to serve New York State citizens better. Much clearer, easier to read. Good. I hope you guys like that because I like those revisions. Good. Well, good. You guys are getting it. Thanks. Okay, so the next plain writing guideline is to use something called active voice. In an active voice sentence, the subject is the person or thing doing something. For example, she ate the apple. It may not always be a physical action like eating or throwing something, but it does refer to something that is being done. For example, the Department of Motor Vehicles processed my application. Now, in passive voice, the subject is receiving the action. For example, the apple was eaten by her, or my application was processed by the Department of Motor Vehicles. And passive sentences often have that by part of the sentence doing the action. Active voice is almost always easier to understand. It's a simpler way to write, and it's often shorter. But, using the passive voice isn't grammatically wrong. There are times when you might want to use it. For example, when the subject or the actor in the sentence is unknown, or when you are talking about a general truth. An example would be, a new policy on drug use was established. This makes sense when we don't know who established it. However, one of the reasons passive sentences have gotten a bad reputation is that they can also be used as a way to de-emphasize or actually hide who did the answer. An example of this is the sentence, mistakes were made. It never actually says who made the mistakes. Generally, if you make sure that the subject or person is doing the action, your sentence will be in active voice, and you'll come across as being more direct and honest. Now, if we wanted to change the first sentence on the screen into active form, we'd have to start by adding a subject to it. Right now, it's not clear in the first sentence who deleted the files. So the new active form of the sentence could be, my coworker deleted the files, or someone deleted the files if we don't know who it is. If I use the passive voice form to cover up my mistake, it may seem sneaky. Kids do that, right? But if you use the passive voice to be more diplomatic, that sounds different. The bottom line is, if your reader is having a hard time understanding who is doing what, then your writing is not clear. Okay, let's try this one. On the screen is a sentence in passive voice. It says, the new policy was supported by the manager of the customer service team. And I'd like you to rearrange this sentence and put it in active voice. Remember, we want the subject performing the action.
Okay, so use the chat box to type in your active version of this sentence.
Oh my goodness, look how fast they are.
Very fast.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Wow, okay. My goodness. Exactly. Yep, you made the customer service team perform the action. That's it. You got it. And you see how easy it is to change a passive sentence to an active sentence. Great. Listen, I only have to say it. The manager of the customer service team supported the new policy. So Remember when I told you about that by phrase, such as by the manager, and we can see this on the screen. That usually lets us know who is doing the action or the subject of the sentence. Then just move the verb so that it's after the subject to make the sentence active. So it becomes, as you all said, the manager of the customer service team supported the new policy. So before we move on to the next topic, which is choose the right word, does anyone have any questions about active voice or writing simpler sentences?
As always, if you do have a question, feel free to raise that virtual hand or to type your question in the chat. And once again, a quick scan tells me I don't see any. If you do have a question, use a question mark. That'll make my search through the chat box a lot easier, but I don't see anything right now.
Okay, all right. They got this. We made. Hey, Jessica, maybe we'll just close this down. They seem to know everything and we can all go get coffee. No, I'm kidding. Okay. No, we're going through all these topics. Okay, our next topic is about choosing clear and understandable words. We're going to talk about that now. But before we go on, I'd like to ask you a question. Which of the 3 books on the screen do you think has the lowest reading grade level? Would it be A, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, B, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, or The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway? And we're doing Slido, so I love Slido.
Oh, yes. So I've just opened that poll on the right-hand side of your screen. You're going to click on the circle next to the option A, B, or C that you think has the lowest. Like it's a close tie between The Old Man and the Sea and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows.
Okay, all right, that makes sense, okay? But the answer is C. And I know why people picked Harry Potter because it was written for kids, right? But the answer is C, The Old Man in the Sea, which was written at a 4th grade reading level. And I find this interesting since Ernest Hemingway was both a Pulitzer and Nobel Prize winning novelist. But he was also a journalist, so he was trained to write to get to the point quickly. Now, what that tells me is that simple writing can be both powerful and sophisticated. Now, you may also be surprised to know that many well-known fiction authors write at less than a 9th grade reading level. And one reason they do this is because the average American reads at a 7th to 8th grade level. And in case you were wondering, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows by J.K. Rowling scored the highest of the 3 books, landing between a 7th and 8th grade level. I am shocked. I am absolutely shocked by that. So, a moment ago, I spoke about how shorter sentences keep your reading grade level down. Another great way to do that is to choose simpler words when you write. Overall, I think it's better to use the words we hear every day instead of unusual words that some readers may not understand. Those are good for Scrabble. So instead of saying something like utilize, just say use. Instead of attempt, say try. And instead of facilitate, say help. I use facilitate a lot. If you want people to easily understand what you write, choose the everyday word. And I always have to make myself do that. Most of you already know, is the sort of specialized vocabulary that people use when they're speaking with their coworkers. But the problem with jargon is that people outside your work group may not understand it. And jargon includes technical terms, bureaucratic terms, such as the names of forms and procedures, and all those acronyms and initialisms that people use without considering whether their readers will understand them. And since you work for the state of New York, you probably end up using jargon every day and lots of it. So let's try this. Can you think of an example of jargon that people in your agency use? Please tell us in the chat box, and I love when these come up.
Yes, so tell us an example of an acronym or jargon that you use at your agency or facility. Go ahead and type that in the chat box for us.
Let me see, I gotta open the chat box.
Oh, I was going to say, if you have, you might have to reopen it. Sorry for that, from the Slido poll.
Okay.
So if you have to, just click on that button to reopen it. I only know one in here that I've seen, Regina, and it's SLMS, unless people are using it for something else.
Right, SLMS, what's dues? Like, I don't even know what that is. And numbers, that's, yep, for the forms, I know. Yes, yeah, I know. It's like alphabet soup. Yes. So many, I know, so many acronyms. I've never seen that before, business intelligence. And sewage pollution, right to know? Wow. CRC, RS6047, that sounds like a form. ML, yeah, exactly. These are all good ones. And some of you, because you don't work at in the same agency, may not be familiar with all of these. But I know that I wasn't. Some of them I know because I've some of you mentioned those in your homework assignments from the last webinar. But yeah, there's a lot. And the thing about acronyms, what's a key block? Yeah, who knows what that? Jade knows what it is, of course. Plus, an acronym can mean two different things in different agencies. For example, COB could be close of business in one agency, but it could be cost of business in another agency. So the thing is, if you need to use jargon in your writing and you aren't sure if your audience will understand it, please take the time to define it for them. The first time you use it, you define the acronym, and then as you write your document, you can just use the acronym because they can refer to it at the top of at the first time you mentioned it. So good, excellent. I don't know what key block. Jay, tell us what that is. Okay, so let's take now I want you to take a good look at the illustration on the screen. Can anyone tell me what the saying or idiom, we also call it an idiom, of this image shows? What do you think this image is saying? Okay.
Go ahead. Type your thoughts into the chat box. Some of you are already there, so thank you.
Yes, it's raining cats and dogs. Yes. A lot of times they kept their animals in the upper portion of their house, and what would happen when it rained hard, the rain would seep through the thatch roof, and they would sink hold on would the rain would seep through the thatch roof, and the animals, the cats and dogs, would come down from upstairs. So that's what it means by raining cats and dogs. Yes, when it's raining hard, we say it's raining cats and dogs. And Jade defined that for it. It's a protective cell for inmates. So, okay. All right. Thank you, Jade. Okay. All right. So raining cats and dogs mean it's raining really hard. Okay. So when you think about it, it is a strange phrase. But the question is, if you use this in your writing and English is not a person's first language, it might be confusing to them and it would be hard for them to understand what you're writing. So even if that doesn't describe your audience, if you use idioms or fad phrases that aren't familiar to your readers, you may confuse them. They may guess what you mean, but if they have to stop and interpret something, you may lose them. So remember, if your meaning isn't clear, people might take a slightly different message away from your writing than you intended. Okay. Another thing that you should avoid is euphemisms. Now, euphemisms are expressions that are used to make something sound better than it really is. For example, pre-owned vehicle instead of used car, downsizing instead of layoffs. And euphemisms can create a bad impression. They handle a topic a bit more sensitively. One example of this is the phrase "he passed away" rather than saying "he died." Okay. A fad word. A fad word would be things like, Nicole has a question. Fad word would be something like, she's pushing the envelope, meaning she's pushing the envelope, meaning that she's like, that means she's like, see, I know what it means, but let me explain it. Pushing the envelope means somebody's trying to be edgy or force people in a position that they don't want to go in. So that would be a fad word. Is that helpful, Nicole? Judgy. Okay, that's a fad word. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Heather. Good. Um, does that help? Jelly versus jealouses? Jealous, okay. A little bit. Okay, thank you. All right. You guys boy, this is a very active group. Good. I love it. LOL. Yes, LOL. That's a fad. Okay. And then after a while, everybody, when they're used often, they just become part of the language. But you should be aware, everyone may not know those. Like something in emails, social media, some of those acronyms, I don't know what they mean because I'm a lot older than everybody else. Okay. All right. Another good way to make your writing clear and concise is to eliminate unnecessary words. Those extra words can create clutter in your writing and complicate your message. And I really think this is a holdover when we were in school and we were told we had to write essays that were 500 words or 1,000 words. You just kept putting in words to get to that limit. So be on the lookout. Expected surprise instead of just surprise. Complicated ways of saying simple things like due to the fact instead of saying because. Filler words such as nature or in terms of or for all intents and purposes. That you can just skip those, right? For example, you could replace the phrase came to the conclusion that with the single word concluded, and so on. Okay. So I'd like you to practice what we've just learned. On the screen is a sentence with some filler words. It says, each and every time we install new software on our entire network, we should perform some type of testing. And what I would like you to do is type any words you think are unnecessary to the meaning of the sentence in the chat box. Let's see. Why not say is better?
Go ahead and type in the chat box. What words do you see in this sentence that could be removed?
Okay. Yeah, you could say is better. We conclude, our conclusion is that the new policy is better. It depends on whether it's past tense or present tense or even future. Okay. All right. Okay. Look, Jessica, will you look at this? Oh
Very, very quick. Yes.
Quick.
Just to recap some trends for
fabulous.
you. Each and every, entire, for the entire network, some type of, seem to be the most often mentioned.
Right. And you see how quickly you notice those filler words? Great. Good. You got it. Each and every, our entire network. Yeah, some type of, right. And this is the kind of thing you would go back. You could just, when you're writing, you just cross those out, just like they were done on the screen. So that sentence, a better sentence would be, a clearer, more precise sentence would be, each time we install software on our network, we should perform testing. No, that's not a comma splice, Jay, because that's an introductory phrase, but good for you. All right. Yes, but that was a good catch. Yes, but it's an introductory phrase. That's why there's a comma there. Good. Wow. We need to have a grammar and punctuation um, webinar. Okay. So I think you guys eliminated all the unnecessary words. Okay. Now, before we move on to the next topic, which is edit and proofread, does anyone have any questions about word choice or removing unnecessary words? And I see we have a question.
How do from Odette.
How do I balance my communication so that a concise and direct communication will not be understood? Yeah, that's called tone. Be careful of the words you write. Don't be too short. There is a balance, okay? And we'll talk, I think this next section will help you to identify if your communication is too terse or short or maybe insulting to people. But we're not going to cover tone, but the next section will help you. Okay, and if you have a question after that, please feel free to ask. Okay, all right. That was a good question. All right, so our last topic of the day is editing and proofreading. In this section, we'll take a quick look at some tools that can make writing a little easier for you. And we'll also cover tips for editing your writing. Now, when you use Microsoft Word or the other Office products like Outlook, you have access to a built-in spelling checker. And I love spelling checkers, but they are no substitute for proofreading. A spelling checker won't be able to tell you that you should have typed T-H-E-I-R when you type T-H-E-R-E. It just knows if a word is spelled right or wrong. And I think we've all had experiences with this. Okay, before we talk about the next tool, I'd like to ask you a question. When you use a grammar checker, should you assume that its suggestions are always right? Yes or no?
Okay, so you can type your answer in the chat box, or you can use the little smiley face button, and you can use the thumbs up or the thumbs down. So thumbs up is yes, thumbs down is no. Click them there for you. But
that's
okay. Really quick, as usual.
They answered before you finished the sentence.
I did, and that's okay. I see no's across the board.
No, yeah. And I think Michael said no, but it's nice to be able to double check, which yes, absolutely. Because sometimes they're like spell checkers. You have to know if they're giving you the correct information, okay? Because sometimes it's a machine, okay? So grammar checkers are great tools, but like spelling checkers, they can be wrong. A lot of times I don't follow the suggestion of the grammar checker, but I always follow the suggestion of the spell checker because my spelling is horrible. And I always use the grammar checker feature in Word. And grammar checkers, as I said, can point out the grammar errors that we make, such as incomplete sentences and incorrect punctuation. But they can miss some mistakes, and sometimes they tell you grammatically correct sentences contain errors. Okay, Googling words can help further, yes. Now, by the way, if you want to learn more about grammar, I'd recommend that you take the Partnerships Avoiding Common Punctuation and Grammar Mistakes webinar. It's very good. So check the website to see when that's coming up next. All right, style guides. This is another one of my favorite topics. Some agencies have their own style guides, and these guides show you the preferred way to handle common topics when you write. For example, an agency style guide might explain how to describe the individuals the agency serves. Are they clients, consumers, or patrons? Now, my next question is, do any of your agencies have a style guide you can refer to? Please raise your hand if you do.
Okay, so click on that raise hand button if your agency has a style guide you can refer back to. And I'll raise my hand too, Regina. I think there's about 6, 7, maybe 8 of us here.
8. Okay. Yeah. So that's what I thought. Not a lot. And I think that's an issue. If you aren't sure your agency has a style guide, ask your supervisor. Yeah. If you're not sure, ask your supervisor, or you can get your own style guide. You can buy one of the old time ones is Strunk and White. Okay. And the handouts that you've gotten for this webinar and any other webinar, they can be used as style guides too. They'll give you some punctuation guidelines, some grammar guidelines, some plain language guidelines. Just keep those at your desk and refer to them when you're writing. Yes, MLA, right, when you go to college, you get the MLA or the Associated Press. APA is Associated Press, AP style guides. All newspapers have them, okay? So once you select a style guide and start writing according to their guidelines, keep it consistent throughout all of your documents, okay? All right, good. Yes, Modern Language Association and APA. APA, is that Associated Press, or that may be something else? Jade, can you tell us what APA is, if you have that? Okay, so let's keep going. It's natural to expect to do several rounds of editing for important writing projects. Each time you read your document, you may want to pay American Psychological Association. Thank you. Each time you read your document, you may want to pay attention to something different. For example, the first time through, you may just check for spelling and grammar mistakes. The next time you read it, you may want to focus on fixing long or confusing sentences. And the third time, you may look for unnecessary words you can cut out. Now, sometimes I read out loud what I've written. And if something sounds awkward, I'll make some changes. You may also be able to ask someone else to proofread your work for mistakes, because another person may pick up on things that you've missed. And it's also helpful to have someone read your document out loud to you, because that way you'll hear what you wrote, not what you think you wrote. And most helpful is to step away from the document for a while. And if I've been working on a project for a while, I find it helpful just to put it down and come back to it maybe in 20 minutes, an hour, or whatever, because then I get to see it with fresh eyes. Okay, so let's try this. Let's practice our editing skills. On the screen, I've got a sentence that needs some work. It says, "We are now in the process of deliberating how to address the issue that exists regarding the performance of our team members." If you were the proofreader, what would you do to improve this sentence?
All right, let's use the chat box for this last activity. Go ahead and try to either rewrite it entirely or give some tips on how it could be improved.
Correct the spelling, yes. Address is spelled wrong. And the first time I went over this, I did not see this. Wordy, yes. Good, excellent. You guys got that. Okay, Jay, we do have homework. So, Jessica, how will she get the homework assignment? It's already included, right, in her handouts, right?
Yes, already in the handouts. So Jay, just take a look at those and email us if you have questions.
Great. Okay, I think you guys got this. So we have the typo, we could reword the sentence and it sounds overly complicated. Yes, in the process of, I take that out. So on the next screen, we have the revised sentence, which is, we are deciding how to address our team's performance issues. It's much clearer and it's much simpler, isn't it? So in case you're wondering, that would bring this sentence from almost a 12th grade reading level to a 7th grade reading level. And remember, editing is a process and it takes a while to learn. If someone else noticed a problem that you missed, work on catching that error the next time you do some editing, because we tend to make the same errors over and over again until we become aware of them. Okay. That brings us to the end of today's class, and the next step is up to you. As homework, we will ask you to proofread and edit the paragraph that we have sent to you to make it clearer and more precise. And my email address will be typed in the chat box. You should write it down, okay? Please complete your homework right on the worksheet we've given you. Save it in Microsoft Word format and then email it to me as attachment. And I'll make some helpful comments on your writing and send it back to you. And think of this as a practice. By 1 week from today, which is Wednesday, July 27th. And please put crafting powerful writing homework in the subject line, or crafting powerful writing homework is fine. Or crafting is fine. Anything, so I'll know what it is. Okay. So
to that as possible.
Yes. Oh, good. Thank you.
So I just wanted to reach out to Oded. He doesn't recall receiving the homework. The files, all the handouts for this webinar would have been emailed to you about 3 weeks ago by April Wholetailing. But if you couldn't find them, can't find them right now, then you can just reach back out to us and we can send them to you again. I do recommend, though, that you search your Outlook inbox for April's name. You can use her full name and that should pop up. But she's also, once again, graciously put her email address into the chat box. So if you can't find the homework, just reach out to her and she can send them to you again. Oh, and thank you, Michael. He says he received it 7/7, so not quite 3 weeks ago, about 2 weeks ago. So keep an eye out for those. And yes, just as Regina said, this homework is due next Wednesday, and it is actually required in order to be marked as complete for today's webinar.
Okay. All right. So thank you, everyone, for sharing part of your day with us. I'd like to also thank Jessica, our host, and April, our tech report. And before we move on to the question and answer period, I'd like to turn this webinar over to Jessica, our host.
Okay, thank you, Regina. It's a wonderful webinar today. I do see we have a question in the chat. I'll get back to that in just a moment. And I do see Dawn has her hand raised, but just a couple of housekeeping items for folks that have to leave soon. So first up, I want to let you know that you're going to be WebEx to click on it and to fill out the webinar evaluation. It should only take about 5 minutes, but we really do value your feedback. So take a moment to do that. Now, the next thing I want to mention is that if you really like today's webinar, Regina mentioned a couple of others that we offer. It looks like this is our last writing webinar for the semester, but we do have some others coming up throughout the rest of July and into the beginning of August. So we have a career in nursing, better team skills, preparing for a civil service exam, and many more. And then our fall webinar schedule will be coming out sometime in August, so keep your eye out for that if you're looking for more writing webinars. Okay, so we do have time for questions now. I am going to start with the one written in from Chelsea Regina. So she says, do you have any hints for the time needed in revising, because she gets stuck sometimes and sometimes there's a time pressure?
Okay, the first thing I would say, and that's a great question, is the more you plan, the clearer and more precise your writing will be. So I think as you go on, you'll have fewer, you won't have to edit so much. The next thing is to take the editing in steps. So like we said earlier, maybe first just check for spelling and grammar errors, then go back and reduce the words in your sentences, and then maybe check for conciseness. So take it in steps, but I promise you, the more you do it, the easier it will become. Also, handing it off to somebody else to proof is and edit is also helpful. So don't be so hard on yourself. This is a process, and just remember the tips we gave you in this webinar, and just start applying one or two of them at a time. Okay? Does that help? I hope that helps. And you can also, again, really, the more you do it, the easier it'll become. Because when I first thought about editing and revising, I hated it. But now it just happens naturally, okay? So, okay, Chelsea, I hope that answers. And everyone, you can always email me. You have my email address. Email me if you have any questions, all right? Not just within the week span of the homework assignment, but even after. I'm very happy to help anyone who needs help. And go get yourself a style manual or start referring to the handouts. And keep taking partnership classes, because as we've seen, a lot of you were on the Foundation's website. And we covered a lot of the same information, and you guys got this stuff. So keep taking these classes.